Well, hello, everybody. I'm Ed Parcaut. I'm here with Brian Galke, and we are Aces53. Well, we're more than that, but today we're Aces53, which is stands for attitude, commitment, enthusiasm, and smile. And the 53rd is the first joker in the deck, which the joker is that unique ability you have when you bring to the table in sales. And this all came out of when I was in college so freaking long ago.
When you rode dinosaurs to school, right?
Yeah. When we used a chisel and a stone tablet.
Back when I had hair.
Yeah. I had a lot of hair back then. I have pictures of it. It's like, wow, the hair of those days.
That's right.
But that's what happens, when you grow older and do lifting and other things, we'll move on. Anyway, we weren't here last week as a holiday, and it was a nice little break. Brian, you were in Vegas.
Correct. You were, and where were you for your birthday? Since that was last week, also.
I was home.
You were home.
At my house.
Okay. Didn't know if you went to the cabin or not.
Huh?
I didn't know if you went to the cabin or anything.
No, it was one of those things. I have a lot. So I'm the president of my Rotary starting this year. Started July 1st. Had a lot of stuff to do with that. Had to go to an event on Sunday because of it. So yeah. So it was like, okay, why go up to the cabin for a few days? Why don't we just stay home and relax? And it was nice. It wasn't that hot. I mean, it was hot for a couple of days, and then it cooled off, and it was nice. So we'll get up there.
Well, it was hot in Vegas, so I took the brunt of the heat for you. Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, but you're inside anyway, so who cares?
This is true.
You never go outside.
I spent some time outside, but you're right. It give me the dry heat. I live in Dallas where the humidity is pretty bad. And even at night, the sun doesn't beat on you, but the humidity still, you're just sweating up a storm no matter where you go. I don't have hair to stop it. So it's like, hi, how's it going? Everything going well? And just, I got
hair doesn't stop it anyway. So it still rolls down.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the one thing why I don't like Florida, Texas, I love being where in California, because we have the Pacific Ocean, which is cold. And so the air blows across that at night, drops us down 30 to 40 degrees. And in the morning, it's nice and cool. Then it gets hot, and then it's cold. I can't stand walking out and it's 77 or 80 degrees. And then it gets to 85.
I think I was closer to 103.
Yeah, well, that's a dry heat. That's Vegas. That's still different.
It was.
And they didn't cool off at night either. Not much.
No, it didn't. But I got off the plane, so I got home late Saturday, and I was fine in Vegas. And I just got off the plane. That humidity just hit me as soon as I walked out of the airport. I was like, oof, I forget how rough it is when we're here. But
that's like when we went to Blake's graduation from boot camp, and it was in not Georgia, but it was someplace like that. Was God, where was it? It was Georgia. I think it was. Anyway, it rained while we were there. And you walk out, it's 90 something and raining, and you're like, the humidity. It's just, you couldn't breathe. But anyway, enough about that kind of stuff. Let's talk about some important stuff like what can you do to keep your clients?
Right.
And we're going to look at two scenarios today. One is we're going to talk role playing, which you ran into when you were younger. I'm just kidding. In Vegas, when a lot of people are pushing it. And the other thing is what you can do if you lost a client and, ask them questions, and we'll get into that more detail. Two things that we want to talk about today.
Sure. Yeah. So like you mentioned, I was in Vegas last week. I was speaking at an event it was called Adrenaline, and it was martial arts studio owners. And there was a consistent theme with several of the speakers. And the big thing about that was when people come in, if people don't grow up in martial arts, they don't know a lot about martial arts. And it can be an overwhelming experience when you hear the price tag for your kid to sign up for something. So it's $200 a month, which is funny because adults will spend that on CrossFit, Orange Theory, things like that. But they don't.
A dinner.
What's that?
A dinner.
Yeah, a dinner. Exactly. But when it comes to their kids, there's kind of that sticker shock of, how does somebody relay that? And then how do they deal with the parents and everything? So what was interesting is several of the speakers brought up the idea of, first, you have to have standard operating procedures or SOPs for every single position within the martial arts studio, from who's working the front desk to who's doing the first class, what does the assistant do? How are they keeping an eye on kids? What are their standard practices? And what is that really? It's what you and I have talked about before. Those are just scripts. So people know what their roles are, know what they're supposed to talk about. What are their guardrails? What are their guidelines?
Right.
And Yeah.
But the SOPs, scripts, I mean, you're talking scripts, but we're talking standards of operating procedures, which is what we come with in the military. We have to know those. And the reason they're so important and why vets do so well in business is because we put those in because we're used to somebody being taken out of that job anytime, any moment, and you got to put somebody else in there, and they're able to read and understand it right away and know that job. Where if you don't have that in place, somebody's got to train them every step of the way. This way they can understand it right away.
Right. And what was interesting is Adam Lyons was there, and he actually talked about why business owners have to create those. Even if you're an entrepreneur of one, why do you need those? Because if you're eventually ever going to grow beyond yourself, you have to have those procedures that you can give to someone else. Right. And they talked about there's several different ways that they actually go about doing it in different businesses. Some people do a video just like we're doing here. Then you can take that video, you can send it to Scribe and Descript, sorry, not Scribe, Descript, have them do it, or they'll give it to their VAs who will then create their standing operating procedure from that. And pardon me for 1 second, Ed.
Or if you just take some of that and drop it in ChatGPT and tell it to make it into a thing. And yeah, and that's really important because I think that's what you should do. But back to the ChatGPT, just be very careful because there's been some people getting into trouble with it. Right. Court cases being made up and stuff like that. So just take whatever you get from ChatGPT, drop it into something else to take the AI out of it so it sounds more like a person.
Exactly.
Because here's a funny thing. I got one little statement. I'll let you go. So I was creating an email to send out to my Rotarians, my first email, right? And so I wrote in the ChatGPT, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, okay. And we're going from Ward Cleaver to Archie Bunker. Right.
Okay.
You get it. Not everybody.
Oh yeah. I get it.
All right. So it does this whole email. It was an amazing email, but it related so many Archie Bunker things in this email. And it went overboard and it talked about drum roll, please. And going for it. All right. And then just yesterday, I get an email for our kick out from the lady who's running that. And I'm like, oh, she ChatGPT'd that because that's exactly what mine did. Mm-hmm. I did it different. I changed mine. She didn't change hers. It had the same drum roll. Please get ready for,
Well, people have gotten inherently lazy, right? We like to copy and paste. And the best way to kind of say what you were saying is it's a trust but verify thing, meaning, okay, I'll trust what it's out there, but first off, if you're going to state facts, kind of verify those, do some spot checking at a minimum. But the key to everything is personalize it. And that's what people don't do. They go, oh God, this looks so great. And then they copy it and just paste it without really going, but is this in my tone of voice? Is this how I speak? And people understand your voice if they spent time with you. Now, if they're new to your email list or they're new to your client list, but we all have unique ways of talking, sentence structure, grammatics that we use, you name it. And people can tell when it's not you. And I was just reading, what book was it? Oh no, I was listening to the Audible book, Book Yourself Solid. And the number one thing that this guy complained about is he read off 3 or 4 people that cold DM'd him in LinkedIn, and they were generic messages. It's all the things we've talked about before, which was, oh, hey, I really like what you do. This is what I do. Can you tell me more, or can you tell me what you do for business? And it's like, oh, wait a minute. If you liked what I did, why are you asking me what my business is? But it's just
thanks for reaching out. I didn't reach out to you.
Right. And one of his big pet peeves was, if you're going to send me spam DMs, at least personalize it with something. Doesn't matter, but you can tell when it's completely made up. Just copied and pasted person after person after person.
So, and what I did differently is I went in and actually changed it to a totally different way of thinking about past presidents in my group. And so I did one, and it was really good. But then again, it was like too much. So I said, okay, this was great, but can you take out some of the too much of this? And then it changed it. I made some changes to it, and it was a perfect email. I even had a few people reach out going, that was a really good email, and thank you for thinking of the presidents before. It's like, I didn't feel like that, but I'm just like, it's important to do it right. So people think it's from you, even though you're getting help. Right.
And that's just it. Again, people know you, especially for the position you're in, where they had to vote you in, they had to know you as a member, everything else.
They didn't vote.
They didn't vote? How do you vote?
No vote. No, this is like socialism communism. There's no vote. Was put in place.
Oh, so there was a coup, is what you're telling me? That's how it works. Every year it's a coup.
They're like, hey, would you be president?
Yeah.
Okay. Guess what? You're president.
There you go. Hey, the company I used to work for is don't complain about something unless you want to work in that department. So you learn real quick not to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to what we were talking about today is role playing is a way that a lot of companies come in and they have everyone go through the different positions, right? Learn the script. But then more importantly than just learning the script and reading it and having an idea is have someone play the role of the customer as you go through each of those things. And then you turn around and then you play the customer and the other person plays that role. And it was interesting because they had this from the minute somebody walks in the door, because a lot of these studios, what do they have to do? They have competition, right? There's different martial arts studios. So they have to do online marketing, or they do events at the local school and their kids hear about it, or somebody does a birthday party there, which the birthday party one we'll have to cover in a separate one. That's a Chris Casamassa, aka Scorpion from the movie Mortal Kombat. That's one of the things that he taught people at a previous one was how to use birthday parties to increase the amount of clients you get, because people come in, you make it an exciting event, and there's an entire process for that as well. But anyway, for each different event, they have these role playing that they go through, and it just does help people try different strategies. What do you get comfortable with? We had Joe on several weeks ago, and he talked about
months ago.
Several months ago. We should have him back. Speaking of him and Mary. So he has the scripts, but then he knew if the person was good enough, then they had enough experience that he would allow them to alter the script and personalize it for them, just like we're talking about with ChatGPT.
Right.
And so why have so many companies done role play? Because people think, oh, I've got it. I know it. You and I talked about this before. You mentioned something about scripts and somebody said, oh, I don't need those. I know what I talk about. But how do you know that you're consistently hitting everything?
Well, because you probably had one years ago and then turned into a guide, and now they don't need it but I'm going to tell you right now, you need to change it. You need to change up what you say, because there's stuff I'm still learning. I've been doing this forever. And when we used to sell by the phone and I had people in, we would do role playing just like you did. I would, here's what I'm going to ask you. We'll go through the scenario and the whole 9 yards. The difference as you keep going and now you're doing purchases and other stuff is you want to still make it better. So you need to keep adding to it on a regular basis.
You mentioned before the military has standard operating procedures for everything. I have a buddy, Javier, he's an airline pilot. And what do? Every time they get on the plane? Checklist. Everything, every single time. Because some people inherently will miss one thing. But if you have the checklist, aka the script, or you've done role playing, and role playing also, speaking of Javier, he's been not just a pilot, he's a captain also, so the highest level of pilots, but he still has to go several times a year through simulators for different experiences. What can he run into? Bad weather, landing gear doesn't go up, landing gear won't come down, you name it, wind shears. Because
how to hit the autopilot button.
Yes, like on an airplane, the little inflatable one. I see
just how they do
all the time.
Pilots are only used for takeoff and landing. The rest of the time is on autopilot.
That's not true. They do announcements also. Don't belittle their job.
It's your turn. What?
Yeah. Huh? What? But so that's why they do the simulators for the pilots and the captains, right? Is because you never know what you may run into. Right. In those situations. And that's exactly what role playing is. It's basically skill development. It allows you to know what you're supposed to do. And then when those things arise, you can adjust and adapt on the fly.
Plus, it's more practice, because what happens is if you just wait for customers to come through and you practice on a few customers and then you don't get those customers because you didn't know what you're saying or how to do it, you need to get every client you can now. So you need to go through these scenarios and change it to something else. You don't like the role playing because it reminds you of something else. Don't care. Change it to something else. Sales. I don't care what you call it, but you need to do it.
Oh, if you look at anything that you're ever successful at, what do you have? You have practice before it's time for the proof, right? So you go to the driving range before you go to the golf course. A singer warms up their voice before they go on stage. You should stretch before you work out. It's no different. It's just people have this negative connotation of sales and role playing's bad because you're trying to think of this. You do it in everything, right?
Athletes do it in their head before they run through the whole thing in their head.
Yeah, in the winter, you warm up your car before you take off. I mean, or you
do
during the summer, you start your car. I have auto start. I've turned that bad boy on before I get in the car, so the air conditioning's going.
Yeah. And now even like singers and concert people have to learn how to duck.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Kidding.
God.
There's all kinds.
It's like, give me a break. It's like what two things my dad taught me, how to duck and life's not fair. Now singers have to learn the same thing.
This is totally off subject for a minute, but I was talking to Kevin Hart's bodyguard in Vegas. And so he's been with Kevin Hart for 15 years. And this guy's not a big, bulky, massive guy, but he had those just random tattoos that let you know that this guy's kind of like a badass. And the whole time he stood there and he's always paying attention to kind of what's going on and everything else. And you just know, what do they do when they're not there? He's in the gym. He's in the dojo. They don't wait until somebody assaults him, then go, okay, now let's see if I do this, I do that. They're constantly training behind the scenes, right? Jiu-jitsu, Krav Maga, you name it, in case they ever need to use it. And that kind of goes back to what is role playing. It's just practice, and it's what you do for anything else. Right. So you want to step through the few different steps of role play, or
go ahead?
All right. So what is step one? Define the scenario. What is the goal of it? And I mentioned, just because I was at the event this week, Martial Arts Studios, they had one for welcoming guests in. They had role playing for if you're a coach or you're an assistant, how do you set up, from even bringing in the pads, to setting up the room for your training class, you name it. So you role play all these different things, but you have to know, what's the scenario? Is it somebody who's been in before, somebody who's never been into a martial arts studio, you name it. After you have that, what do? Well, you assign the roles. And this is who's going to be the customer, who's going to be the person taking care of the customer. You can say the salesperson, but if people don't like that term, you can rename it whatever you want.
Yeah, but it could also just be a customer service rep, or it could be a service rep. It could be any way all the way through till you know how to deal with your customer, so that you can, help them down the road feel comfortable. And it's important. And that's like what I'm dealing with now with, I'm bringing up Rotary, how to make everybody feel special, especially our guests who come in. What can you do differently? And one of the things I'm doing is I'm making it to where each table, if you don't have a guest at your table, you're going to pay a little bit, not a lot, but it's so that they'll go up and every guest that comes in, who are you here? I'm so-and-so's guest. Well, he's not here right now, so let's take you over to my table and we can sit down with us. And then they, that just fight over these people so they feel needed. And it's the same thing we're talking about here. Role playing and understanding so that you know what to do, so it's second nature to you. Absolutely.
And like we talked about, if you go to see a play or anything else, where they have a ton of rehearsals before they have the final event. So role playing is so common. Oh, look, it's time for them to go next door into the yard. Lovely timing always, right?
And they have an understudy. You should not hear that. I said.
Yeah, that's true. They have backups, right?
Yeah.
And why do they have that? Because they have the standard operating procedure where somebody else can step in.
Right.
Step number 3, what's the scenario? What's the situation that they're going to be performing? We've talked about this before. This is huge in car dealerships where people come in. Is it somebody walking the lot? Is it somebody who came in off the internet? You have to know what are the specifics around the individual event that you're setting up for. And then after that, what do? Practice active listening. We talked about this with Chris Voss. That's what made him such a phenomenal interrogator, was the fact of he listened, he repeated back, or what he called parroting them back. So he would parrot back a few of their words so they felt seen and heard. We also talked about that's what they used on MIGO therapy. That's exactly what you do. Is person A says something, person B said, if I understood you right. And Chris Voss's goal with the active listening was to get them to not just say yes, but to say that's right.
And we've been talking about that since we started this in January. We've had a whole thing on it, because that you need to active listen. 100%. If you're not listening, you're not right. You need to listen.
People tell you what they need. That's the craziest part, is if you really get into learning statement analysis, which there's a great book called Mind Reader by Daniel Lieberman. That's a good one, because people in their words will tell you what they need. Body language will tell you, facial features will tell you. There's so many ways to understand people, but most people are still so busy focused on what they want instead of building that rapport and relationship with someone. That's where they really F it up.
F it up.
Well, I could say fuck it up, but I didn't know if we wanted to.
You just shadow banned us, man.
The next part is,
come on, hurry it up. Let's get through these. It's not take all day.
Active listening while we're here. Sorry. Conducting the role play. So that's basically let people go through it. Then you can basically step in and help them. So if you go back to, I think you mentioned earlier in one of the previous episodes, like call centers. What do call centers also do? Not only do they make people go through the training scripts and everything, but then they randomly will listen in on calls so they can provide feedback to people on what they did right or wrong when they were talking to a customer. So that's why people will listen in. And that's why when I was an RVP, we would have to do ride-alongs to see what was a relationship of our account manager to our customers, and then be able to provide feedback later on. So it's not just about title and authority, but it's about having an outside input to the person after you see how they perform, because we can all use maintenance, right? Little tune-ups here and there. It doesn't matter if it's your golf swing, if it's how you talk to customers, it's the email you sent. It's getting that feedback that helps as well. And that's why when you're
RFP regional vice president.
Regional vice president of sales. And
yeah, because if you're actively listening, you'd see he's dropped a little acronym that we don't do acronyms unless we explain them.
Well, we don't do them on purpose, but yes.
Well, you can do them and just explain them, because not everybody's going to go, well, maybe that was a real,
Right. Well, maybe I am a very important person. Oh, damn it, that's VIP. Okay. But when I was an account manager, that's what we'd have the occasional ride along. And what was the purpose of it was to watch the engagement, watch the interaction, and then have a debrief afterwards. Now, I will tell you, going from a small company to a larger company, the one thing that disappeared quite a bit was debriefs. And debriefs are so important. It's nature of the beast. When you have a lot going on, it's hard to break things down. But when I was working at a very small company, after a demo, we did a post-mortem, or what did we do right and what did we do wrong? And then we would go back and we would change those SOPs, or standing operating procedures, of what is the new checklist? What is the new way that we want to operate? And that's why role playing is good. But if it's two people just farting around, not really having a third party watch it, or they're not discussing what they could have done better after the fact, you're not growing. It's not really going to help. Yes, you're mastering the lines and the interactions, but you're not really taking full advantage of what role playing can do for people.
Right. And then go back to the recordings like that we record, right? Mm-hmm. 2 reasons. One, for training purposes. That's how you can say it. But yes, also if somebody said something and then they come back and say, I didn't say that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That clients all the time would, potentially not tell the truth.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said that politically correct, but they would lie. And then you go, we record everything and that's what you said. And this is what you said. Mm-hmm. Well, he told me I included this in it. No, he did not. Or she
That's why a lot of people avoid putting things in text or email, right? Because then they can't be held accountable. And that's the whole reason people started doing CYA, cover your ass, for your acronym there, Ed.
And that's exactly why I don't put things in text, and I want to talk to my clients, because mm-hmm. And again, we don't, not only is it something that could come back to bite you if it's said wrong, but then the tone, they have no idea. They're when they read your text messages or email, it's in their voice, not in your, or in their mind, what they have going on right then.
Their attitude at the moment. Yep. That's right. Then you're absolutely correct. That's why sometimes it's even easier, if you have to do a video or voice text versus sending a regular text, because people don't know, are you being sarcastic? Are you being legitimate? What's really going on? An example of that recently is a friend was in from out of town, and then we were catching up a few days later. He's like, hey, what did you think about, or how was Saturday? And I was like, oh, it was a shit show. And he thought I was talking about meeting up with him. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. It was after you left, just things got nuts with all the people that were there. So it's, again, because we were miscommunicating, I thought he understood that I meant after Saturday. He took it as I meant when I hung out with him. So that's why I get on the phone and clarify with people.
Yeah, well, it seems like he needs some more support, and to be okay with who he is in life.
Could be. All right, and the last and final stage is repeat and refine. Yeah, you don't just warm up once. You warm up every time before you work out, or take practice swings, whatever analogy you want to use. A lot of people like golf, so we throw that in there. But it doesn't matter what you do. You stretch before you take action. That's all role playing is.
Right.
Right. And then you learn to refine and make it better every time.
I don't know if we have time to go over what I want to talk about since you took the whole time for yourself.
Well,
well, my biggest thing is making sure that if you lose a client, they go with somebody else, to make sure you follow up with that client and ask them, what could you have done differently to win their business?
Yes.
Right? It could be as simple as, you know what, we're so connected in our circle. I didn't want you to know, that information to get out. Well, I won't tell anybody. Right. I had an agent and I'm told him for a while to get into divorce stuff because that's what's going on right now. Right. Yes. I occasionally can do those loans, but most people just sell the house because it's so costly to buy the other person out right now. And so I was explaining to him how to do that. And I was like, can you break it, go to somebody that in your circles at a gym, be next to them, get to know them and do it that way to get to know them. And he's like, well, I already know somebody, but they didn't use me. And I was telling him how to make sure that he can talk to them and get that information so they could use him. And maybe you just change how you do things for people who are divorced. Like, don't put a sign in the front door on the yard. Don't do this. Don't put it, certain things you do not to make sure, or I guess I'm talking right here on Tuesday, make sure that they feel cared for and safe when that's going through. Because a lot of times that's a really tough time for people.
Oh, it is. I went through that. You and I talked before we started recording. When we put the house for sale, because we were separated and we were leaning towards divorce, we had a staging company come in. Because if you walk into a house and somebody's going through that, what do they think? Oh, let's lowball them. And it wasn't a matter of that. It's just we both agreed to sell the house. So we had a staging company come in and set it up. And so that you couldn't tell that there was half the stuff in the house that used to be there. So if you'd been there before, yes, but you wouldn't know the difference as somebody new walking in.
Well, that's the other thing. Don't tell people what's happening in their life.
Exactly.
There's certain things that you need to keep private for your clients. I have a fiduciary responsibility for my clients when I deal with mortgages and stuff. Nobody knows I do loans for people unless they tell people. It's not my job to give your information out. Right. I don't do that. Other people in my industry will do that. And I think it's wrong, but that's the difference.
And this is a complete ADD moment for a minute. What's interesting is in the door-to-door market, they'll say that when they go up and they knock on a door, they'll tell them who else's roof they're doing, because then people want to do the same service that another neighbor has already kind of vetted. But I can absolutely see what you're saying on this. It's not anybody's business, really. So,
this is different though.
It is.
If I have solar, I'm selling solar, I put it on so-and-so's house. You can go down and ask them how great of a job I did. Or if I put a pool in for someone down the street, that's different. Yes. But when there's a change in a family dynamic or something personal, that's not want to get that information out.
There are people who will hit estate sales just to find out who's the person to contact to find out how they're selling the house.
Yeah, it's a little late by then if they're doing the state sale. It's already been figured out.
Yeah. Now I did think of one for your buddy, right? He needs to just scour Facebook for whenever somebody changes theirs from married to it's complicated.
The problem is, the only reason that we even have 35% of the existing home sales on the market right now is because of life changes that are happening, divorces, and people who are passing away, those kind of things. They're major life changes. Oh, yeah. Not somebody who goes, I want to go buy a bigger house because I got a baby coming. They're gonna shove that baby in the closet over there for the next 2 years because we're not moving.
Right.
And paying, $1,500 more a month. And that's what people don't realize.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that, in a sad way. Like, two people I know in a charity I used to work with both passed away this week. And that's one of the things people ask, well, what are they going to do with their houses? What are they going to do with their different things? And that's got to be such a, you never want to, or at least I'll speak for me. I don't want to drag on if I ever get sick, but I also don't want it to be sudden. Right. So people don't always think about those things until an illness strikes. A lot of people don't have trust set up. They don't have.
Oh my God, get a trust.
Yeah. So we've talked about all the time what schools don't teach. That's a huge one, right? Is how do you prepare people for things? And that's why people who sell coffins and everything can, if you don't go and look at kind of a morbid thought, but you should have an idea of if you want to be cremated or if you want a fancy coffin before you pass. Because if not, it's the grieving people who are worried about letting down the person who passed and will overspend for a box to go on the ground.
Or a box to go on a burner.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you can get freaking coffins on Amazon now. So you could shop many different places for those things. But the problem,
imagine that being delivered to your house.
They take advantage of grief, unfortunately. But all right. So what most people don't realize is so if you don't have a will, you go through probate. Right. Period. If you have a will, you go through probate. The difference is they know what your wishes are. Correct. If you have a trust, you don't go through probate. You just go through the trust.
Right.
That's the difference. And the probates on it usually, and don't quote me exact numbers, but right around $31,000 to $41,000 is going to cost you to go through probate.
Wow.
Depending on your estate. Because I mean, if it's only 100,000, there's no really probate. So, right. But it just depends on what you have. And if you don't have a trust, I mean, when my wife and I got married, we had a prenup. And everybody's like, why do you have a prenup? It's like, because I don't want her shit and she doesn't want my shit if this doesn't work out. Yeah. And that it's just easy to start from the beginning. You keep your stuff, I keep my stuff. Okay, anything we bring together while we're married is split 50-50. Right. Sounds great. 19 years later, don't need it. We redid all our trusts.
Yeah.
And she just divorced me last week. I'm just
there. Well, I thought for your birthday. Wow, that's a really awkward birthday present.
Yeah. My other two were perfect birthday presents, but anyway.
Yeah. Texas is a 50-50 state. So anything you had coming into the marriage is already yours before. So if you had property, if you had 401k or whatever, and then of course, anything you bought while you're together, you split 50-50, but there's not.
You're not a community property state?
Nope.
Yeah. See, California's community property. So, and a lot of people don't realize that doesn't work here, right? Whatever you bought before, if you're together married and they ever showed up there, watered the plants, did everything, it's fucked. Get a prenup.
Yeah. No, I think the connotation is, oh, so you're already thinking it's not going to work out. It's like, no, I'm thinking smart, right? So, yeah, the amount of people who should have had one and didn't have one, yeah, you can see the after effects of it all.
Well, you're just being realistic about in case something happens, what are our intentions. It's no different than doing what we just said about knowing if you're going to pass away. You don't know you're going to pass. Well, eventually we're going to pass away. That just happens. But you should have that set up originally. And I know this is not a wheel show or a trust show or a real estate show, but this is all about planning. The same planning that goes into doing for customers and SOPs should be done for your life. Yeah, role playing. Yeah, keep us out of the bedroom there, buddy.
No, I mean, so if you think about all these things before you need it, right? Like we were talking about, you go to the driving range before you go to the golf course. So if you go and you figure out your will and what you want casket wise and everything before you actually need it, ironically, what we're talking about kind of is role playing or practicing in case something happens later.
It's an SOP. Standard operating procedures. If you're going to have them in business, you need to have them in your personal life even more so that you can stay focused. Every night, what are you doing the next day? Not like, okay, I get in here at 8:30. Oh, fuck. What am I doing today?
Yeah. Oh, you just got
first of all, 8:30. What the hell are you doing at 8:30? You should be in there at 7. What's your problem?
You're right. And this is kind of on a different path, but it's on the same.
Snakes and sparklers.
Some people talk about writing out your to-do list the night before. Or, that way when you wake up, you already know what you're doing. A lot of people are big fans of, you should have your week planned out on Sunday, all the way through the following Saturday, and you can adjust it on the fly. But like you said, instead of just showing up and going with your gut on things, what are your goals? What are your key performance indicators, KPIs? What is there a certain dollar threshold you want to hit this week? All those things are things that can come into standard operating procedures, scripts, and or role playing. So,
yeah, it's important for me. I learned a long time ago, write down what I'm going to do tomorrow. Not, a lot of people do a to-do list and they write down all this stuff on there. And there's no way they're going to do all that stuff that day. Just write down what you will do that day and then move the others for the next day. I mean, you need to write down, this is what I got to do and get that done. There was a book that came out a while back for our industry. It was Win by Noon. It was a whole marketing where you do all your stuff in the morning by noon and then you win because you're all done. And the rest of the day is to follow up with customers and other stuff.
So Brad Lee talks about that in every morning, one of your goals should be something you can attain. So you're starting off the day with a win or you're ending the day with a win. And Andy Frisella, who owns First Form, he had a little daily book, right? And you listed out 3 to 5 things you want to accomplish that day. and you either said it was a win, I accomplished it, or it was a loss. And the goal was to have more wins than losses in your to-do list. Because you're right. People will put on so much, they'll go into analysis paralysis, and then they won't take action on hardly anything. And there's another book, The One Thing. I don't know if you've read that one or not, or even Atomic Habits, of basically put only a few minor things that you know you can accomplish, and then you're free to add to the list after the fact.
Right. Well, once you sit there and get that done, you're like, okay, what else can I do? Get this done. My problem is I deal with clients, and so a lot of times those appointments might get pushed or they're longer, but it's so much better when they're not in person.
Right.
Because then we talk, yes, you talk on the phone about other stuff, but you really get to the point a lot faster on the phone.
Yes, 100%.
All right.
All right.
Anything else there, buddy?
No, good. So we'll just pick it back up on Thursday, and nice to be back. I'm a little tired from last week, so this is kind of nice.
Take a break.
Yeah, we did take a break.
Take a break from speaking if it's so tough on you.
It's the time zones that do it. It's that 2-hour time zone.
All the name dropping. So tiring. Kevin Hart and
Mark Cuban. What? Ran into Mark Cuban.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you want to support us, the easiest way is just go to our YouTube channel, Aces53, and support us. Subscribe. We appreciate it. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Ed. Have a great Tuesday.